Hi everyone, this is a basic video to show you some of the design features of PowerPoint that you may not have already known about that are actually quite powerful when it comes to doing some graphic editing and designing infographics for your project. So you'll see I've opened up PowerPoint here. We don't need any of these text boxes in the background, so I'm going to immediately just select everything here and delete that. The other thing that most people don't realize is that this in PowerPoint is just treated as a piece of paper. I can actually size it to any shape that I want, and I can do that easily by going to Design, Slide Size, and they have these two standard sizes. This is the old PowerPoint standard format from previous to 2013, and this is the new size. But I can go to any custom size as well. So for our purposes here, let's select something like a ledger paper in portrait mode. Okay, so here we have essentially a large piece of paper. This is 11 by 17, which is equivalent to two regular pieces of letter paper side by side. And I can begin by creating all kinds of items. So most often what we're going to be dealing with is the insert menu, and we're going to be either inserting pictures or by and large shapes, or within shapes you'll see this option for text boxes. So to begin with, basic shapes are nice to see, so you might insert something here. You'll notice that if I'm clicked off of an object, I'm getting these standard menus across the top. But once I click the object, I have a new one that comes up over here, okay, this format menu. And that's true of everything, whether it's text that I've put in a text box or an image or something like that. So when I click this box, I have some additional options for what the fill color should be. You can see it's changing there on the fly, as well as the outline color. Okay, and within that menu you can also change things like the weight of the outline. So if I wanted it to be larger, if I want it even larger than 6 points, I go to more lines, and I could specify over here a width of 20, for example. Nice big wide border. Okay. One of the best things about PowerPoint is that you don't have any margins to contend with. So you can put things right up into the corner, whereas if you were trying to use Microsoft Word, it actually wouldn't let you do that without setting the margins to 0, and then you have some additional complications when you go to print or publish this. So I can take this shape. Now, some other effects that may be useful when you're designing your infographics is the shape effects. You don't want to go too crazy here because too many design features just distract away from your main message. But having something like this, a nice little drop shadow in behind here, you can see here that's got sort of this little gray around the back, makes it look like it's sort of hovering, it's sort of popping a little bit off the page. Once again, if you want more information about that, you can notice here that now that I've applied the shadow, there are some other effects here where I could take that shadow and I could decide how much bigger it should be. Okay, and maybe how blurry that should be. So you can play around with some of those features if that's important to you. Additionally, I could take this object and I could shape it differently. So if I've made it a rectangle and I decided I didn't really want a rectangle, I can use the edit shape options to change it to something like this. And the rounded rectangle has a nice sort of feel to it, and you can use these little options. So often on a shape, if you get this little yellow cursor, that's going to give you some ways to tweak that shape to customize your needs. So getting closer and closer to an oval, whereas closer and closer to a rectangle. That's nice to work with. Something like this is useful when you're trying to make text stand out. So if, for example, I was to put in a text box like this, let me just take that and we'll reproduce it a bunch of times. Okay, and if I needed it to say something, you'll notice that the text actually presents a lot better if it's presented on a backdrop of a nice color or something like that. So all I've really done is taken these two items and combine them together. Now, if I know that they're going to stick together from now on, it's actually pretty nice if I wanted to have them both selected at the same time. I can do that either by clicking somewhere else on the page and selecting so that I grab all of that. That's going to show me the selection of the text box plus the external selection. And I could right click, group, and group together. So from now on, they move as one. Okay, so I'm not separating them. And if I need to make any changes, then I could always go back to grouping and ungroup. Another thing that's possible, let's just insert here, let's say a circle. Okay, so let's say I wanted these three objects grouped together. Or actually, even better, let's say I want the text and the green but not the blue. So if I was to come up here and do this, I end up getting all three of them, and I don't want that grouped together. So I can actually do that by clicking them one at a time. And you'll notice here when I push the control button on my keyboard, so I'm actually holding the CTRL button, then you'll notice that symbol gives me a little plus sign, which means that I'm going to add to the selection. So here, if I use the control button, I can add that in. If I click it again, it's going to remove that. So in this case, rather than grabbing all three things, I could take them all and hold the control button and remove that one thing from the thing that I've selected to make sure that I'm selecting exactly what it is I wanted to select. It's also really nice to have some of these additional features up here. So for this selected object, you'll see things like align. Well, I'd like it to be nicely aligned in my page. So if I went to align, center, it's going to put it right square in the middle horizontally of the page. If I did that again for align, middle, now I have it in the center and in the middle, and I know that that's the exact center of the page. Okay. It's also possible to get a better sense by using the ruler. It gives me an idea of where things are, but if I put grid lines on, then I can also get a greater sense of how things are positioned to make sure that they're nicely lined up. Picking up from there, there's also some additional features you'll notice here when I double click something to bring forward and send backward. So if I notice here, right now the blue dot is on top of my green background, but if I wanted the green one to be in front, I could simply click my blue dot and I have these options to send backward. Okay, if I click send to back, it's going to put it on the very back of everything. Okay, it means all other pieces on the page will be layered on top of it. Whereas if I have multiple layers, then I might use the send backward. It just means jump it back one layer. So if I had multiple items on the page, they've all been put in by default on different layers, and I can bring it up or down in that set of layers by using bring forward and bring backwards. Okay. Maybe the last thing I'll show you about alignment, it's actually pretty nice, is if I was to insert, let's say, some new objects. Let's put in a rectangle here, and we'll color it a bit differently. Okay, and maybe we'll insert a triangle. Okay. So let's get rid of these grid lines because we don't need to see them. Now, if I select multiple objects like this, okay, you'll notice that as I'm hovering it, it's already giving me these red guidelines to let me know if I'm getting close to the middle, right, to see that they're lined up. So that would be the black triangle is exactly in the middle of the yellow rectangle, and you could do the same thing over here. Notice that that needs to be bring to the front. Okay, so it sits up on top, just like that. It's also giving me a sense, for example, how close my object is from other objects. So it's nice to follow those lines right here. That would be equally spaced between the triangle and the edge of the rectangle. But I can also do some things where if I select all, align to middle. Now the thing about this is that if I have multiple objects selected, remember when I only had one object selected and I use align middle, it's going to put it in the middle of the page. Whereas if I have multiple objects selected and I click align middle, it's going to align them all so that they sit on each other's middle. And if I do align center, it's going to align the three of them, even if they are completely off the side of the page. So it's not, again, have anything to do with the page anymore. These three items, I'm not aligning it to the page, but because there's multiple selected, if I align middle and align center, it puts them all on top of each other, one after the other. That's pretty useful as a tool. Let's put that off to the side for the time being and refer to a few other things. The next thing you're almost likely going to be doing in your infographics is grabbing images from the internet. So let's see if I was to take something like, well, this fruit bowl. Okay, that's easy enough to get. I could copy, bring it over to PowerPoint, and I can paste it. I just use Control V from the keyboard. Now, one of the things you think is, okay, this is a really great picture, I'd love to use it, but as soon as you try and layer it on top of anything else, you have this problem where the edges of the picture make this look a little silly. It would be really nice if we could simply get rid of this white background. Well, PowerPoint has that option built in. When I click on the object, in fact, this time I double clicked on it to bring up the format menu, I can do some standard things like putting a little drop shadow behind it. I'm not interested in doing that right now. What I'd rather do is go over to here and see an option for color, set transparent color. So what it's going to let me do is then pick one color in this entire picture that it will remove 100%. So if I decide, okay, I don't want any of this white, I click anywhere on the white background, and it has made that white disappear. So any place that was white is now clear, and if I can move this, you can actually see that I can even see right through that little hole there from wherever I were to drag that. Okay, that's a nice way to get rid of stuff that's been put on a white background, or any background if the background is all one color. If I did the very same thing, let's go back to reset the picture, and I picked a different color. Let's do color, set transparent color, and this time I picked red. Well, it's everywhere it found that tiny little shade of red, it's removed it. And if I did that with any one of these other colors. So the only thing about this is that you can only do it for one color. If I've clicked on this kiwi and I've gotten rid of that color, then I can't also remove the white later. I don't have that option anymore. Okay. Let's grab another picture here to find something that maybe doesn't have a perfectly uniform background. So this is thinking you would love to use this picture. So we're going to go over here, let's copy it, we'll go back to PowerPoint, and we're going to paste it here. So you think I'd love to use this picture, but I just want the airplane without any of the extra background. So if I double click on it, I have this other option here called remove background, and this is for taking out something with a more complicated background color. When I click it, PowerPoint automatically tries to get what the focus of the picture is and try and keep it, and everything that's in purple it's going to get rid of. So here's a little preview of what that might look like. Well, obviously it's made a few mistakes. Let's undo that. I'm going to shrink it down a little bit more so it fits on my page. Okay. And let's go back here to remove background. It's doing its best guess. But in fact, the first thing I want to do is to tell it, here's the focus of my picture. I'm going to bring these edges in so it knows that this airplane is the thing that's important to me. It's still going to do its best to guess what parts of that color are background image and what parts of that color are foreground image. And you can see how that would be difficult, that some of these colors are very similar and they could actually both be part of an airplane or part of the sky. So almost entirely it's done a pretty great job. Okay, so everything here is just going to give me the airplane like you can see up there, but it's got a bit of the sky here that I don't want, and it's missed a bit of the airplane over here that I do want. So what I have to do is go to mark areas to keep, and I'm simply going to drag this line through an area that was originally removed that I want the program to keep, and it's going to take another guess. And over here, this is a part of the airplane that it got rid of, and I want to say mark areas to remove, and I'm going to draw a line through it, and once again, it's going to do its best guess. If it doesn't get it perfect, you may need to add another small element here or there. Okay, and now when I click away, all I'm left with is this nice picture of the airplane. All of the rest of this is wasted, so it's actually kind of useful up here to use the crop tool and to say, actually, I'm not interested in keeping any of that. I'm not going to need any of that picture anymore. So let's get rid of all of that and trim it down to just the airplane. So now we have this pretty cool effect where these airplanes and other fruit bowls and things like that nicely layer on top of each other, and you can actually see through that picture wherever it's supposed to be blank. Okay, so pretty powerful stuff, and you can do that with almost any image. It'll be harder if you were to do a Google search. Let's try something that would be fairly complicated. Let's do people talking. We'll do an image search here. And let's say that you were interested in this photograph for some reason. It's going to be harder for PowerPoint to decide what part of this picture you want to keep because there's a lot going on. You can give it a try and do your best guess at getting the software to do it, but it may be easier just to look for another picture that's going to be easier to work with. Okay, the last step is to talk a little bit about design and layout, because that's something that I think most students need a little bit of extra help on. And it might be difficult at first to critique your own work. You might spend a lot of time working on your infographic, and because you've spent so much time on it, it makes a lot of sense to you. And what you need to really do is challenge others to look at your work and give you critical feedback, especially people who are unfamiliar with the content and who maybe haven't seen the infographic before. So here's a couple of examples I'm going to show you back to back, and these are completely made up. I've never had a student, I mean, this is not a real student work, but I want you to take a look at this poster here. So imagine that a student would make this. This is something a student could make. I've just put in some dummy text, and you can see they've put it in a nice little box, so that's kind of pretty. But some of the things that are unclear, for example, would be where do these pictures go? Is this picture part of this? I'm going to assume so. Um, and for example, some elements like this, it's not hard to know where these necessarily fit along the timeline. Things are out of context. Maybe this phrase has no context. It's sort of floating out in the middle of nowhere. So even taking something like this, I'm going to take these exact same design elements, these very same text boxes and very same pictures, and if I was to rearrange them slightly differently, I want you to see the difference in impact of the two pictures. Okay, so notice what I've done here. For one, I've grouped the images that apply right through with the text. It's clear that this picture has to do with this text, this picture has to do with this text, and I've done that by allowing the text to wrap around it. That's something you may need to play around with. I've also had, for example, this as a centerpiece. I've made it a larger piece. I'm saying what I really want you to do is I want this to catch your eye from across the room, and maybe this title to draw you in. And then once you're closer, then there might be some other things that you would read that would be intriguing to you. I've also done a few little things like maybe adding in these arrows to specify where the text is referring to, so it gives you some more concrete way of basically telling the story. So I want you to think broadly when you're designing this. How are you communicating to your audience? If this was a written work, if this was an essay, then it all happens fairly linearly. You begin at the introduction, and in the introduction you sort of lay out, this is my overall argument for the entire paper. But in an infographic, it's not clear necessarily what your main arguments are. So you kind of have to think about it in terms of designing an essay, right? I'm going to use certain graphic elements that are large and easy to identify, and then I'm going to draw my readers through. So it'd be pretty clear to the person reading it that I'd need to start here, I'd begin here, 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 and then move through here, okay, left to right. So kind of think top down, left to right as a way of processing information. And if there are things about your infographic that it's not clear how you want how the reader should read it, then you might want to put in some design elements, maybe a 1, a 2, a 3, to sort of indicate that this is the order in which you want the user to proceed through the information. So hopefully that was useful to you, and that you will gain something from the process of trying to actually design some work on your own and come up with a product that you're proud of.